So I'm going to introduce you to 5 fantastic experts that we have in the crowd today. And I'm going to start with you, Ida Ebbensgaard, and you're an AI journalism expert who recently launched also a book. We have Erik Paulsson Neppelberg. Come up, Erik. You are the head of AI from SVT, the public service broadcaster in Sweden. We have Alexandra Borchardt. Welcome. You're the author of the EBU report coming out today, Leading Newsrooms in the Age of Generative AI. And we have Ludwig Siegele. Welcome, Ludwig. You're the senior editor for AI initiatives at The Economist. And last but not least, we have Amy Reinhardt. There you are, Amy, senior product manager, AI strategy at the Associated Press. So let's give them a hand, our 5 experts. So, as I said, I think we all who work in AI journalism have those kind of questions that kind of nag us a bit, that keep us up at night. You know, it's like, how do we drive adoptions? What from all the things we can do with generative AI or AI should we actually put resources in? I have a lot of those questions. And now it's an opportunity for you to bounce them to these experts. And we also have this Slido QR code, so please get the questions flowing, and Marie will also help me to pick up some questions. Ida, I'm going to start with a question with you. You recently came out with this new book where you argue that a lot of people in our societies actually miss out on these AI superpowers that you describe. And this is basically because of skepticism and fear. Do you think it's our role as a media or as media companies to kind of facilitate that or help people overcome those fears?
Well, look, the role of journalism is as the role of journalism has always been. We are going to enlighten and be critical to authorities. That is the core of what we do. We are not team AI, though it seems a little bit like that today. But when we go and be a journalist, we need to have the professional way of working. But let us be clear. We are in a situation right now in an extremely volatile world where we can see that a technology is coming towards us and is being used. And it's a powerful tool. And if we are only making a coverage that is driven by fears, then we're going to turn people away from this technology, which we can see has so much potential. And if we do not master this technology and only use it, we will be living in China's world or in US world, which unfortunately seems to be a place where we doesn't want to be, and we don't want to be there so much anymore. So what we want to do now is to master it and not go out and live in a cage or in the forest somewhere. This is actually a value question. Do we want to grab on the future or not? And that's why the coverage should also show that.
Great. As I said also, or Marie said, we have some pre-aggregated questions that came in beforehand. And a couple of those questions were actually about adoption. Like a lot of us work in big media companies. You at SVT, Erik, you have around 2,100 staff. Can you give us a couple of tips? Like, how have you been working to foster that kind of real adoption and to reach out to our colleagues, basically?
I think we decided early on that we would like to have, we believe that AI transforms everything that we do and how we do it and how it's perceived by our audience. So we kind of decided early on that we want to have this kind of all-aboard strategy. So my job as head of AI has not been like predefining use cases or predefining solutions, but building this enabling structure for everyone at SVT to be able to do something where they are in the organization. And I think my background is, I'm not a journalist. Well, I was food editor at Nöjesguiden in Sweden once upon a time. But I come from a product background working with our streaming service for the last 10 years. So, and I think there's a lot of methods in that context that could really be adapted to this adoption of new technology. And some of those are, for example, It's been mentioned a couple of times early on today, like putting like process first, enabling time for cross-functional exploration together. It might seem a bit like a broken record, but time, I think, is crucial. Enable time for people to make those discoveries themselves. So we focused a lot on just setting up these context for explorations, like hubs for program development, hubs for news and sports, hubs for office admin, and hubs for product, where you get the time to meet cross-functionally, just exploring new tools and functions together. And I think that in relation to like an all-aboard strategy, just having tools enabled for everyone is good. But at the same time, I mean, we could perhaps move even faster. And I know a lot of companies are choosing the speedboat strategy or the innovation lab strategy. And we are, of course, also thinking about that. But I think for us, and we've seen a lot of results, actually, so far, just this first year. Yep. And I think, so enabling everyone, I think, is, with time, that's crucial.
Thank you. Alexandra, so the report is coming out today, actually. And I mean, we have seen also in these presentations that we're trying to balance kind of fears and opportunities. And you have spoken now to so many senior leaders in this field. What would you say the mood music is? Can you describe that a little bit?
I think it's definitely a mood of opportunity, and actually I deeply believe that AI, generative AI, it will deeply transform journalism, and it will be good for journalism given the business models keep pace with that. So that is the critical question. But I would agree with that it's really important to have an optimistic perspective, but it's equally important to really focus on the core of it all, on two things: on the journalism, on the quality of the journalism, and on the quality of audience relations, on the quality of our human connections. And I've been in journalism for probably more than 30 years, actually. I even started before leaving school with journalism, and I deeply care about journalism. And AI can only be a means to an end, to improve the quality of information and to improve the quality of human connections, audience connections. And every news organization has to find their own sweet spot, what these connections are, who the audiences are, and what the definition of quality is for every single news organization, for every single news brand. And I think most of the media leaders that I have spoken to for the report and for last year's report, there was trusted journalism in the age of generative AI, really agree with that, because what else can we do except for fighting for a better information environment?
Great. I'm going to throw myself into a completely different topic now. As you see, I don't have a logical structure here of picking the questions. But Ludwig, I met you last year when you came to SR, and you said that you were going to learn from us. But I actually thought, hey, they're doing pretty radical things at The Economist, like synthetic voices and automatic translation, for example, also. But how far can you stretch a well-respected, prestigious, old brand like The Economist into the field of generative AI?
Yeah, well, that's a great question. I'm going to try to answer it without getting fired. I mean, there's already, I think, a gap at The Economist between what people think we are, a printed magazine produced by people coming from Oxford, and what we actually are, really, what we do. And we're a pretty digitized organization. So the brand we have kind of constrains or limits what we can do. That said, it's interesting. We recently did a survey of our readers, and fully 69% said you should use AI, and we trust you to use it. So we can have some room to do these things. And but the question still is kind of, to what extent do we use the technology to change our engine, the engine kind of, or what we stand for, certain liberalism, independent thinking, all these kind of things. And so the way we're thinking about it is we don't really change the engine, kind of, that works, the engine works, but is there a way we can use the technology to kind of spread our gospel, to kind of multiply or use technology as a force multiplier to spread what we believe in and what we think is good journalism?
Are people interested in these new functions? I see a question about that.
I would say, I mean, there's two areas. Our colleagues interested in using the technology, or my colleagues, and our readers interested. And I have to say, so far, not that much on both levels. And the question is that because doesn't provide enough value internally, these tools, kind of if you give them style checkers or translation tools, or is it, I mean, my guess is the technology is just not good enough, at least in the case of The Economist.
I think we recognize that, a lot of us. So, Amy, flying across from the Atlantic, do you want to compare a little bit? I mean, here we are in a Nordic context, you've heard use cases, you've heard the thoughts and discussions. How do you think that, I mean, the discussions compare or the situations compare if you look at the US and North American market and if you compare that to Europe and the Nordics?
Well, definitely, I think the Nordic region has set the pace for all of us. And so now everybody's like, we need chatbots. We need chatbots. So everybody in the US wants a chatbot, even though the return on investment on that is, as most people have experienced, is pretty low or at least undetermined. Could that be useful in terms of gathering your database and making sense of it and then give your boss the chatbot that they're asking for? Sure. So as long as you're doing it for other means, I think, of tidying up your data assets.
We're ahead of the US. That's why I put this question.
Yes, you are. You're absolutely ahead.
Here was an interesting question, Alexandra, because you meet a lot of these C-suite leaders. Do you think that they are waking up now, and how do we educate the top managers?
I think they have woken up actually much faster than before. I'm still from that generation when people put like all the digital functions in some extra company, just hoping the internet will go away. So this time around, actually, it was much faster than with social media. So everyone was like, oh, gee, now we have to get our teams together and we have to get legal in. We have to get everyone in. We have to build these cross-functional teams. I think AI has done a lot to speed up these cross-functional teams and efforts, which is really very, very good. And there's also in the report, there's some really applied use cases and how you can actually do that or enhance that. But it's interesting because one of my interview partners said he sort of sits in the middle and he always has to educate the C-level leadership because they might see something on LinkedIn and then say, oh, this is cool, we have to implement this. Can you do this tomorrow? And he's constantly negotiating between, what's possible, what could be challenging, what could drive things forward, what could make sense, and these like, oh, we want to be front runners in AI. So there's a lot of that education going on.
That is actually a job in itself to get the C-suites to open the money bag for some AI projects. Ida, you have thought a lot about like AI and the societal aspects of it all. I mean, we have touched upon this discussion around deep fakes and so on, but not so much now. What's your view on this? Is this kind of wave vaping away or disappearing a little bit? And was it exaggerated?
Isn't it funny that when we have a conference like today, it's not like deepfake is not the center of the discussion. But if you walk out there and ask people on the street, what do you think about AI in journalism? They see the picture of a deepfake Trump or whoever saying something in front of them. And that's actually interesting because to us, we can see, well, if there's a value, you might use it, but the threat from deep fakes is actually pretty overrated. Last year was the largest election year in the world. And at the beginning of the year, the World Economic Forum had this list about what are the most imminent threats coming to us. And deepfakes and things very close to that was on top of the list, and all our newspapers wrote all these analyses about, whoa, this is going to be awful for the election. And what happened? Well, at least in a European context, I think the US is still over here for a while, but in a European context, almost nothing happened. We totally overrate how deepfakes is distorting our view of reality. Because A, people are actually pretty clever, and B, what happens is actually not that you begin to believe in everything, but that you don't believe in anything. It's a liar's dividend. So you become more skeptical. So if you see a piece of wonderful journalism with something you never thought would be possible, people will say, nah, I don't believe it. And the other thing is it makes our everyday job as journalists much, much harder, because you all know how leaks come. It might be pictures taken of a document sent by another phone, so you don't have all the tags on it, and makes our work to simply see what is true or not true much more difficult. But the deep thing, I think it actually is very overrated.
I mean, Amy, from your perspective, do you agree with this perspective or this view?
Yeah, I mean, before I did AI, I was with verification of online content, and so this was kind of the nexus. Last year, I was like, oh, I bet you're really worried, and we just didn't see that happen. And I think people are like, they don't believe it. They also become more sophisticated. I mean, how many armchair OSINT experts came out of the woodwork during the Kate Middleton photoshopped photo? And I was actually really pleased to see it. Everybody's like, can you see the zipper there? It's just, they went into very big detail on that, and I thought that was impressive, and that the online communities have at least come a long way to like not trust most things, which is unfortunate for us, because then we have to try and get them to accept that some of the things we are sharing are legitimate.
Erik, I have a good question for you now. Who should head the AI-driven editorial product development, editors or developers?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, I've been working with digital product development for 15 years, and I'm not a programmer, and I'm not a journalist either. So I guess human general intelligence, in a sense, like generalists. No, I actually, before I got this assignment, I was working 10 years with the journey in our streaming service, going from an editorial manual curation to the more algorithmic-based AI-driven personalization. And I think, I mean, you need to have all those perspectives in mind to really see the whole picture. But I really think now, coming from my background, leading this coordinating role at SVT, I kind of see all these, I think I mentioned it earlier, these methods that have been like exclusive to the tech world for 10 years. And it's like, you can't work agile in the TV production world, you can't work agile in the journalistic core. But I think some of those methods are really now helping us becoming these learning organizations. And I was so happy when Michaela and Leonora mentioned the tech sprint, which is actually a hackathon that we have at the tech department at SVT. Every spring and every autumn, we have 2 weeks of just do whatever you want, pitch whatever you like. And that is actually one of the methods that one of our AI hubs now for the program department has implemented. They do every other Friday, they do a hackathon. Just not predefining stories or use cases, just putting 13 people from different genres together with 8 people from production in the same room. Like, okay, what do we want to learn about this week? And then we have the whole demo culture. Like, okay, and the demo culture is really good now because it's focusing on talking about what you learn and also displaying your mistakes. There's so much mistakes going on right now in the world of AI. So showing like, oh, this was really, really bad, and this case went so bad. So
to be
having these methods
generous
really
with the mistake sharing.
Exactly.
Ludwig, you have a comment?
Yes, I mean, we had this discussion yesterday, whether kind of editorial should have more power or the product people. And of course, that's a big issue at The Economist also, because these were separate worlds and we didn't have to deal with each other. And I'm kind of the bridging person. I have to say, after having done this for a year now, I wonder what agile actually means. Yeah. Because I've been told our IT shop uses agile methods. I have to say, it's a huge bureaucracy. Nothing changes, nothing gets ever done. Whereas editorial is very agile in the sense we're bottom up. Things work quickly. If we have an idea, we implement it. We write articles. And I think AI, the technology, is much closer to journalism than software in a way. So I'm really pushing at The Economist that actually the AI people, the developers, are in editorial, not part of the IT shop, because it's just a.
Or it shouldn't be separated.
If you have to wait for the next sprint, in 4 weeks, nothing gets ever done.
Ludwig is doing some serious bridge building here to the product side. Good. We talked about the time-saving aspects already, and maybe one of the greatest quotes from today was from the Jonas, the Politiken journalist, who said, "This is actually the first time I save time with a tool introduced to me by managers," basically. He had a good quote. So here's a question that came in beforehand. So AI-assisted tools save time for newsroom people, especially the journalists. But how do journalists use the newly found extra time, and what is the overall impact, Amy?
We haven't tested out efficiency gains. I think it's a marketing strategy for right now that there's going to be huge efficiency gains. You know, AP produces 2,000 articles a day, and if we put AI into the mix randomly, like which headline needs to be checked, which summary needs to be checked, and we haven't been able to really craft summaries that are something that we want to bring into production. So I don't know if there are efficiency gains. I think certainly if you're doing news gathering, there can be enormous efficiency gains with that. There can also be sense making with some analytics. If you know enough about where your learning or where your knowledge cliff drops off for understanding analytics and how to apply them and make decisions for your newsroom. But I just, so far, it's a marketing term. Nick Diakopoulos is trying to research that right now, and I hope we get more numbers. I don't know if the others feel that way.
Any questions from the room? I mean, we got in some excellent questions here from Slido. Anybody wants to put one in person? Think about it. We can come back to that. This is also actually like a strategic question or about strategy. So lots of great individual ideas and tools presented today. Thank you. But do newsrooms, or does any newsroom have an overarching vision of how the newsroom of the future works or will work? Ludwig?
No. And that's the problem. I mean, when I started this job a year ago, I mean, my strategy was let's kind of experiment, let's do prototypes, kind of install the infrastructure to do all that, kind of have the platform to build data pipelines, enable journalists to actually do that. And that was important, kind of to create momentum and excitement. But I have to say, in hindsight, and I should say, it's very much in tune with The Economist culture. It's a very bottom-up culture. People it's not the editor telling us what to write. It's more like you will hire the right people and hope that they will write the right stories. It's not the pure model of that, but it's a bit that. But in hindsight, I have to say, all the stuff which we've developed and prototype, that's all very important, but I now perceive that as a bit kind of incremental and not kind of, I mean, if you look how quickly the technology is developing in Silicon Valley and what comes down the pipeline, I think we have to think much bigger and do more strategic thinking about where will we be in 3 or 5 years? How will the world look like? And what can we do to get there? And that's why we kind of, we actually started right now to do an AI lab, kind of a more skunkworks initiatives to research, kind of to come to a common vision at The Economist, what the future will look like, and then build something that that gets us to that future, at least in some way.
Yep. I sometimes say that there are a bit simplified 2 categories of people in AI journalism. The people who talk about AI and the people who actually do something with AI. But Alexandra, you talked to a lot of people, maybe like me, who talk a lot about AI. But have you been impressed about any kind of overarching strategy so far when you talk to people for your report?
Oh, that's a trick question now, because if I say no, then that would put everyone in a bad light to talk to me. No, but I mean, the overarching strategy, actually, Anne Lagercrantz, your boss, actually, the Director General of SVT, I mean, the overarching strategy is, and she said, we need to move journalism up the value chain. And I think this is an overarching thing. We just need to move it up a level, because there'll be a lot of journalism, the copy and paste kind of journalism that still exists today, that will become, well, not redundant, but this will be produced by AI, and we've seen that in presentations. We have to improve our connections with the audience. We have to bring in more diverse voices. I mean, we haven't really served all our audiences. There are so many underserved audiences, so there's a lot actually to do to move that journalism up the value chain. And the other thing that Anne said is also super important. We are accountable, and this is like she said, we are at home and we are accountable. So we are where the people are, and we are accountable. Try to, hold an algorithm accountable. Try to reach someone at Spotify or Netflix or whatever. But we are here. People can walk and ring our doorbell, and we are here. So these two things, I think we need to focus a lot more. Or that's also what other leaders said now. And in contrast to last year's report, when everyone was still talking a lot more about fancy tools and what you can do and what you can't do, really focusing again on the journalism, putting it front and center, putting the audiences front and center. Also, be careful that you don't lose connections to your audience by automated versioning of things, and then you don't understand what your audiences really want and want to do about. And I just really enjoyed the presentation just from Dawkins Industry that said, we really worked on the product with our audiences, and I think that is really important too.
We're going to come back to that, but Marie, have you seen any interesting questions?
That are interesting. I remember last year we had kind of the catch box we had to throw to people to ask questions. I think we're more of a Slido bunch here. So lots of great questions. But someone is asking, isn't it problematic to use AI to find news stories when it might have similar built-in biases as human journalists? What perspectives might we miss?
Is this a problem, Ida, that we are starting to use the tools more for example, to spot stories or for news gathering, but in a way we are a bit naive to and forget that they can actually be serious biases built into these models?
I think it was some wonderful presentations we had up here, and very inspiring that it's actually possible to learn it. What is the gut feeling of a great journalist? But obviously, it is important for us to know that there are these biases. So what I would really love to see is like the McDonald's case. What do they have a basket over here of things that they afterwards learned that they missed? So if we learn what we missed, then we might be able to drag it back into the center of the stage. But basically, what the question is again about trust. Like you can find stories, but the core concept of journalism is that you are accountable. We are accountable. So whatever tip you might find from a wonderful bot, which I adore, and I think everybody should copy Tom's, and I love them, I would want to hug them. But the core question is it a good story? And you as a journalist and editor, can you be held accountable to it? Can you trust it? And you cannot, in any world, put that responsibility over to a bot.
Alexandra?
Yeah, of course there will be biases, but these biases were put in by humans to begin with. But you could also use AI to really check on biases. And I don't know if Ezra is still here, but there's a use case actually in the report that NPO does, that they have an avatar focus group. So they build digital twins of sort of regular people with different whatever voices, outlooks, and then you can actually run your stuff against these focus groups to think like, are we missing a perspective? Can we really? So we have all the tools now also to check on biases, and obviously there still needs to be a lot of reflection on what biases are there in the first place, and also the data the machines will turn up will be biased because, well, people who produce the data were very often vocal, very often sort of, male experts in the dominant culture. But But you could also cross-check. That's also someone said that in one interview partner. You can also cross-check with different models now. Do you actually turn up with something that proves the opposite or something different? And so there's a lot more tools to check on biases.
It's an interesting perspective we got yesterday from Ole Reisman at Der Spiegel, who basically said maybe we could have less bias if we have less human in the loop. It was just a thought that was a bit provoking, but anyway, Ludwig, short comment.
That's exactly what I wanted to say.
Sorry.
Thank you, Ole. I mean, humans are biased, and I think the problem is not biased machines right now. The problem is biased humans. I mean, and I'm not saying that because people are bad, not well intended, because they're humans. And I think at this point, at least, AI adds kind of a more balanced viewpoint. Kind of, you can check things, and it gives you a broader view of sources. So I think it's AI. Yeah.
I think it's the problem of using commercial models. They are aligned to be the happy intern, to be able to tell you exactly what you want to hear, and that isn't news. News is sort of the opposite of that. We are kind of in your face. We will red pill you every time. But the commercial bots, I don't think, are built for journalism. They are built for everything else but that. And I think we can see clearly now, if we ever had doubts before, that the alignment, the physical alignment that the tech platforms have had with governments, not just the US government, but with governments around the world, is troubling.
So we have a question from the floor, actually. We have a lot of journalists here, but the first question comes from academia. Carl Gustav. So, take a mic from Sarah. And who are you?
Yes, I'm Carl Gustav Linden, a professor of data journalism at University of Bergen in Norway. Thank you for this really interesting discussion. I think it's excellent. My concern is with regards to what we're talking about is the sort of political science of LLMs and media and journalism and the dependence on the Silicon Valley. I've been researching sort of the dependence on Silicon Valley from a Google and Facebook perspective for quite a few years. And I think we see the same patterns coming back with OpenAI especially, and sort of the combination of Silicon Valley ideology and Wall Street capitalism. And what makes things much worse right now, we don't know what's going to happen with Donald Trump and AI development, and what security problems are we going to have in the future, quite near future, with what we're doing. So I think there's sort of I would have hoped there was much more debate about this at this conference, but it might be tomorrow.
But is this a lively debate, for example, at SVT? Like, are we becoming too dependent, or could this actually disrupt some of our future plans? Or how do you reason around these kind of questions?
I think, as in many cases, we always balance like all the things that we do, like the cost, the value, the quality, but also the independence aspect of it. And one of the reasonings behind building our own SVT GPT, sort of a AI platform UI, is building something that could be like model agnostic. Even though it might be more expensive, it might be the right thing to do. And we've gotten what you say in Sweden, vatten på kvarnen, since January, like this might be the right thing to do from an independence perspective. So we can use other models, French models, Chinese models, but perhaps even Swedish models in a couple of years, I don't know. But there's always that independence aspect of it, and much more clearly now since January.
Amy, you partnered with OpenAI at the AP. How are the deliberations around this now, and has it changed like in the last months?
I would say partnership is a strong word. I mean, it's not really meant to be a partnership as a transaction, for sure. AP asserted its intellectual property rights, and OpenAI, we were the first to do so. We are built as a licensing operation, so I think that's one of the reasons why we were first. But no, we did also kind of deal with Google Gemini to have our information surfaced in real time. So I think AP is figuring out a way to play in this space that protects our IP and protects AP in the long run, because we have a big world to cover, as we all do, and we're trying to figure it out. But I just think, I think DeepSeek was very interesting. It showed us the way that this is something that is within reach if we were able to gather as an industry. I also think, and I'm really concerned around, we've lost our streams of distribution, and I think that is something we could and should take back collaboratively, that would assure us some press freedom that I don't think we have right now.
This agreement then, has it been positive so far?
It hasn't been negative, I'll say that. It gives us tech credits to be able to explore and to see, and I think if newsrooms are experimenting at all with AI, 9 times out of 10, it's OpenAI's API, and the other models aren't getting used as much. And so I think we have to be experimenting in that space. I think we need, as an industry, to talk about what does it mean when there's market dominance of one AI company, and what does that do to our journalism. And so, we're trying to experiment with others as well. I know that Scroll India has also experimented with Claude. I don't know if the others have too, but I just think we need more models.
Alexandra?
Yeah, I think what is really important, what I think you said that earlier this morning, that this is so important, that AI literacy is so important, and actually understanding how these models work and the interest behind it. I happen to be a political scientist myself, is really important, not only teaching students so everyone knows what's behind that, but also educating the public about that, because it's very important to even understand this. I think we can't really do much to decrease this dependency, because we will be dependent on these platforms, and we will be faced with all these inbuilt tools that we don't even recognize at some point that there's AI in this. But understanding that this stuff is in there and what it can do, and why there are certain cultural aspects to it, like, for example, this sort of American upbeat tone that sort of pervades all the technology. I used to live in the US, so I'm quite familiar with that. That is something that people at least need to know.
Yeah.
Ludwig?
To your point, I mean, that's the kind of the dominant discourse or narrative, that this is going to be all concentrated and sit in Silicon Valley, and we'll have like a duopoly or something like that. Not at all clear. And you mentioned DeepSeek. It seems to me actually the market is moving towards many more models, different models. It gets cheaper to train. There's more data around. And so I don't think we know now whether that's actually a problem, that concentration. On the deal, The Economist hasn't done a deal yet, simply because we think we are Lamborghini, and I think OpenAI thinks we are a Beetlebug. And so there's a big difference between what they're willing to pay and what we would like to have. And also I think the deal so far has shown that actually they're not quite working. I mean, it seems to me, for example, the tech help from the big tech companies, OpenAI, Anthropic is not coming. But that doesn't mean we won't do a deal. I think we will do a deal, for example, if we keep control over how our content is presented, if we get data, if we get not tons of money, but enough money, we will do a deal, but only then. And so stay tuned.
We have some breaking news here, I'm happy to say. Now, a little bit around for all of you, and short answers now. I saw a pretty pointy, a little bit critical question here, like, in this kind of AI product use case festival, somebody called this, are we forgetting about the users? Are we forgetting about the audiences? What do you say, Ida?
Yes.
Good, short answer. Erik?
Somewhat, I think. Yeah. I think transparency is the thing I think we should talk even more about right now.
And Alexandra?
I think the audiences will lead us the way, because they are adopting AI tools at a massive scale, knowingly and unknowingly, and we probably will have to sort of catch up with the audiences at some point. But we saw that in the presentation with Doggin's Industry, that really the audiences might have different ideas, and so it's important to keep them in the loop.
Ludwig?
Yes.
Okay, good. Amy?
Unsure a little bit in terms of the use cases. I'd love to see more exploration, something really useful that maybe breaks out of the box of repackaging something we've already done, if that makes sense.
Somebody said today, I mean, people are not so interested in the AI aspects if you're a user of a normal website or if you trust a brand. Hey, they want our journalism. Do you think that we, as AI journalism geeks, are focusing too much on that and that it has a risk of spilling over into, for example, conveying too much that this is an AI product? Erik?
Yeah, that's what I think about the whole transparency discussion. I think there was a great work done within the Nordic AI Journalism Network last year about transparency rules. But we keep on discussing at SVT like when we are being transparent or not. I think in our policy we right now say that we should be transparent when generative AI has had a vast impact on the things produced. But I mean, we are now producing like kids shows with monsters on flying carpets with like more than 50% of the show is made with the help of AI tools, and we are not transparent. And why is that? Well, because we don't think it gives the audience any like help, because there's not a trust issue. It could have been done with just graphical designers or anything like that. So, and we are in our policy more concerned around when it comes to news, like in general. But we are doing like illustrations with AI, which we are right now being very transparent, like this is made with the help of AI. But we were like, this is not the right thing to be transparent because it takes focus from the story. This is not. But when regards still to photorealistic stuffs and like when we nag on the authentic parts of it, we're still very, very concerned of being transparent. But I think we might be right now a bit too transparent sometimes. That takes the eye from the actually journalistic product.
I think actually personally I've started to shift foot a little bit around this. I thought that AI transparency, I still believe that it's so important. But for example, did you guys see that Time Magazine Person of the Year issue where you could kind of chat with the article and also consume it in different ways? That was almost absurd how many disclaimers they had, basically giving you the impression that you can't trust this article at all. So it was some kind of over-transparency. And I think for me, I mean, people are trusting our brands and we should be in control of what we publish and not kind of blame the AI. Esa, we have a question from the floor, from Helsingin Sanomat, and maybe we have a mic. Yes, coming.
I am running.
Hello, Esa Mäkinen, executive editor at Helsingin Sanomat. I have a question for Amy Reinhardt. David Caswell wrote on the Reuters Institute blog about AI Vanguard and AI Rearguard from the Perugia Festival. I think his point was that there is a division between journalists, especially in Europe and in the US. And if I interpret correctly, he's saying that US media, US journalists are lacking in AI adoption, slower than in Europe, and from my perspective, especially slower than in Nordics. How do you feel? Is it a thing in US, and if it is, what is the reason for that?
Journalists specifically? Yeah,
Sure, yeah.
I don't know if we're necessarily that far behind. I mean, like, I would say the Nordic region is like 2 to 3 years ahead of us. And I think part of that is, technology often is slow to adoption, and this is one of those things. But I'm really impressed with how people at small newsrooms even have already acquired the language of AI. They're talking about large language models and training and inference and all this stuff in a way that it always surprises me. So I don't know, maybe there's some hesitation for journalists to use it because, these commercial models can't answer the fundamental source, which is what is your source, or who is your source. They can't answer that. So maybe there's a hesitation there. And there's no hesitation for journalists to use the ubiquitous transcription. And why? Because it actually solves a real need. And I think a lot of the tools that we've seen, as great of experiments as they are, they don't solve a need. So I think if we can continue to work with product teams together and try and solve real needs in the newsroom rather than make things up or just shove it into our existing workflows, like, hey, can we get it to a headline or a summary or things that we would already do? If we could do something really imaginative with it and it actually moved the journalism forward, I think we'd be closer to adoption of that, if that makes sense.
Ludwig, a thought on this?
So as part of this AI Labs initiative, I spent a week in October, I think, here in the Nordics, and in February in the US, and I think the difference is more than 2 or 3 years. I mean, this is Scandinavia or the Nordics are clearly, and part of Germany are clearly far ahead. It's more innovative, more interesting, more open, and I of course wondered why that is. And I think it's media here are, I think, richer. So the economic pressure isn't there. There is more cooperation here. I mean, the fact that you have something like this conference, I don't think would be possible in the US. There's too much competition. What else? Yeah, openness to technology. And the willingness to explore. And I think American newspapers are much more siloed, and that makes things more difficult.
There's a sharing culture, I think, in the Nordic region in general, and I think that you're seeing that with the technology. And the more we can share and be open, I think the better off we'll be.
So we're going to finish off with a really difficult question. I think we have, a lot of us have dreamt about kind of starting from scratch. Like, what if we could rebuild this whole media company from the beginning, and how would we do it then? And we have a question about that. If you today, from scratch then, would build a new media house, what's the biggest difference to how it's built and organized compared to how we organize it today? Ida, you have a very small media house as a freelancer, but you have a lot of experience also from your time as editor-in-chief.
Yeah, that's a very big question, right? And not only about AI. May I answer it in a slightly different way? Because right now I mostly work as a freelancer and doing columns about media at Politiken. And what I've noticed is how big a media I am as a person. And I am sure we all are following the most interesting thing in tech today. So I think I am actually unsure if I would build a media house.
Oh, wow, okay.
Good answer. Erik, what would you do if you had a couple of billion Swedish crowns and you were going to start afresh?
I'm going to go back to the first thing I said today, and that would just be giving time to everyone, because I think, for example, it would be cool. I think my dream would be that everyone at SVT, 2,000 people, would have these hackathon Fridays every other week. So let's put everyone at SVT together for like 2 weeks and see what projects are being pitched and what teams would we come up with. And then that could be the starting point for it all, I guess.
When we had our basic course of AI last year at Swedish Radio, we had 1,227 ideas coming in from the staff. And I mean, some of those ideas were they blew us away. We could never have thought them up in a kind of strategic division or whatever. Alexandra, I mean, you have such a long newspaper background, and now you're in a way looking at the media industry a bit from the outside. So what would you change if you went back to the media industry?
I would love to build something new again. The culture. I would really pay attention to the culture. First of all, a listening culture, listening more to audiences, but also listening more to each other in the media organization, and also a lot more like an entrepreneurial culture, really trying things, testing things, admitting when something's wrong, dealing with failure, learning from failure, learning culture, entrepreneurial culture, listening culture.
Ludwig?
So The Economist was created more than 180 years ago. And it was a kind of was a pamphlet originally against some protectionist laws in Britain. It was a very small organization, and over time it grew. And I think that's what I would do today, is create something very small with a mission, but use technology kind of to amplify what I'm doing to automate a lot of what we call journalism or news organizations today. And if you look at things like Exponential View by Azim Azhar or any of these newsletters, that's what they do. They're 4 or 5 people, but they use a lot of AI, and they force themselves to use AI, and that's why they have much more impact, than The Economist, but relatively more impact.
They're punching above their weight, yeah? Amy?
I'm a little with these, where maybe no media house, but if we had to start over, certainly have the data clean. Start off with clean data, metadata, all in alignment, so that we can actually build on top of that. And then have the product team and the news team sit together.
I see some SR people nodding and shaking their heads at the same time here. So, I mean, that was a great experience, at least for me. I hope you had some golden nuggets in these answers. And as I said, I mean, we have the experts here in the room. So please talk to each other. Have a nice beer tonight. Come to the dinner. We're going to round off here, and we're going to give them a big hand, an applause.
Thanks.
And if you're interested in the new EBU report that Alexandra authored, please download it here on the QR code. Thank you.